When I was a boy, my dad was our high school football coach. And as far as my young mind could tell, he was famous. On Friday nights after the games, I was allowed to go into that most hallowed of places, the field house, where my dad reigned supreme and I felt like a young prince. I grew up, and in the spring of my senior year, our high school newspaper asked me what I wanted to do with my life. I wrote that I wanted to be my own boss, do something special, and see the world. I wasn't just going to have some J-O-B. I was going to be somebody, just like Dad. But I went away to college and my life began to flounder. I took 5.5 years to graduate, and then I spent the rest of my 20s hopping from one meaningless job to another. Every job I landed, whether it be English teacher, Coca-Cola truck driver, or car salesman, would feel pointless after a few paychecks, leaving me to lie in bed at night and ask myself, what am I doing with my life? By the time I was 29, I found myself grinding away in the defense industry for a company that built B-2 bombers that would someday sneak around the world and drop their payload on Saddam Hussein. I wore a suit and sat near the office copy machine where I cracked jokes with coworkers. Yeah, I had become the making copies guy. That fall, I moved into Marquita Courts Apartments on Lower Greenville Avenue. I hadn't been there long when I met a couple of local musicians named Rhett Miller and Murray Hammond. We got to be friends, and one Thursday night they asked me if I wanted to bring my guitar over to Murray's place to play some songs and drink a little beer. I went. It was fun, and they asked me back. After a few months, we worked up a 10-song set and booked a show. I was nothing special on guitar, and I'd never been in a band that played real clubs before, so the idea of playing in front of people made my stomach hurt. But when set time came, I hopped up on stage and faked it like an old pro. After the show, there were girls to talk to and free liquor, and at the end of the night, we split $143. It was awesome. And for the first time in 22 years, I felt like I was back in that old field house. The following Monday, I returned to work and did the only clear-thinking thing a man in his 30s would do. I quit the damn job and joined the band. Naturally, this disappointed my family, who thought that one's 30s were the time to settle down and not fart around. But I was single, my car was paid for, my rent was only $280 a month, all bills paid. I felt like I'd retired. Over the following months, we added a drummer, Philip Peoples, and named ourselves the Old 97s, a reference to a Johnny Cash song about a train wreck. We played 3 or 4 shows a week that first year, 30 songs a night. Half wires, half we stole. We played tiny bars in Dallas and Denton, drawing maybe 30 people for little money, but I loved it. Every night felt like a Friday night, and every morning a Saturday. Things began to go fast. We recorded an album on the cheap and hired a manager who booked us some shows in the Midwest. When the album came out, we bought an old Dodge van from a church for $2,000, packed it tightly with guitars, amps, drums, and sleeping bags, and headed out for our first tour. With a capacity of 600, Chicago's Double Door was by far the largest venue we'd ever played. Understandably, we were nervous. Who were we? 4 turds from Dallas, that's who. We couldn't get a proper gig in Deep Ellum. But whether it was just a freak situation of Texas twang meets Midwestern values, or just simply heavy decibels and cheap Leinenkugel, we hit a home run. They loved us. Though we were the opener of 4 bands, we stole the show, sold all of our t-shirts and CDs. For the first time, and I'm fully aware of how petty this sounds, I got to sign autographs to thrilled strangers. Over the next couple of years, we played any town that would have us. I threw my back out and carried my amp up some icy steps in St. Louis. I crashed on the floor of some guy who lived in a bratwurst factory in Milwaukee. We even got caught in a blizzard once in Iowa, and had to sleep on the side of the interstate in our van, which had no heater. I made very little money, had no health insurance, and had to cash in my 401k to pay my rent. If this lifestyle sounds irresponsible or just plain juvenile, try looking at it this way. Let's say you like to fish. Imagine getting paid to go on a month-long fishing trip with your best friends, and every time you caught something, even if it was a dirty old shoe, people cheered. That's what it's like to go on tour. But how long could this fishing trip really last? I was 33 years old and had only made 15 grand in the 3 years since I'd quit the desk job. In the days before the internet, the only way to get your band kicked into a higher gear was to get signed, which is the baseball equivalent of making it to the bigs. It means you no longer get $3,000 to make a record, you get $300,000. You get to be on TV. People give you guitars. In the spring of '96, we went on a grueling 40-night tour of every shithole from Wilmington, North Carolina to Seattle, culminating with a headlining showcase at Austin's South by Southwest Music Festival. Dead broke, the tour nearly killed us. But when we rolled into Austin, we were a lean, mean, face-melting machine. I remember walking up to the show that night with my beloved Fender Telecaster in hand and seeing a line stretching 4 blocks. Every label and music industry geek at the festival was there to see the quirky Texans and hear their drunky love songs. We played the best set we've ever played that night. 45 minutes of ferocious, barnstorming American twang. We have a song in which we yell asshole in the middle of it. When we got to it that night, I remember the crowd going wild as they shouted it along with us. That was the exact moment I knew it had worked. I had ditched the system, rolled the dice, and won. In a world where rock and roll is famous for self-destruction, starting a band had stabilized my life. Late that night, our singer Rhett and I wound up at a house party. We didn't have enough money for a hotel, so as the party wound down, we wandered into a bedroom, unrolled our sleeping bags. We lay there in the dark, giggling like schoolgirls around a campfire. And Rhett said, "Dude, for years, I've come down here to South by to see the hot new band. I've stood out there in the crowd and looked up on stage at some shithead singer who has the audience eating out of his hand. I've always wanted to be that guy and been so jealous of him. And tonight, I was that shithead, and someone was looking up at me." That was 19 years ago. In just 3 years, I'd gone from the making copies guy to a full-on rock and roll guitar slinger. The band, Rhett, Murray, Philip, and myself, are still together. Last year, we released our 10th studio record. It debuted number 30 on Billboard and was a Rolling Stone Top 50 Albums of the Year. Still, I have this feeling from time to time that a shepherd's hook will appear and drag me off stage and back to the old 9 to 5. Call it paranoia, but this whole band thing still boggles my mind. I have no boss. I walk my kids to school every morning. When I have to put on a tie, I have to look at YouTube just so I can remember how to do it. I'm here to tell you this was a dream, not a plan. I am the son of a football coach from a dead-end road in a dark forest deep in East Texas, where the idea of bending guitar strings for money is preposterous, much less a career. I'm so happy. I hope you are too.